Recording will start soon. Okay, I think we got it.
Okay, here we are.
Okay, so this is the new setup. We now have a chin camera and a face camera. We're on Google Meets now, and I'm in a new office.
Nice. Look at that.
So yeah, I just moved into my new place. I moved across the neighborhood, and nothing's really set up right now, but this is my new office for the next probably 6 months.
Wow.
And then there it goes.
Very cool.
Okay, so where were we on Fledgling? It seems like a long time. My life is very different. I have been up for like 2 hours. I'm now a 5 a.m. person.
All right. 5 a.m. Luke.
At least I won't be groggy.
Good. I have been up for about 1 hour. I am a getting up whenever the baby girl climbs on our heads person.
Oh yeah, I remember that was a good phase of life too.
Yeah, those are good times.
I just don't really do that anymore. I might not pay for it. Okay. Well, here we go.
So we were talking about Fledgling, and I sent a link to you about paper that was featured on 2 Minute Papers. I don't know if you're subscribed to 2 Minute Papers, but
I am not.
He does graphics and machine learning and stuff. And this is a paper that he linked and made a short video about, which basically says, if you think you're clever, that's great, but you need to be focusing on ways to use computers to do things because computers keep getting faster and you don't keep getting any smarter. Something like that. So it was like, initially everyone was trying to make a great chess playing computer, and they got all the chess guys and they figured out all the smart chess moves. But at the end of the day, they just did a huge search algorithm, and then there was a huge search algorithm, and they just used that, and they just brute forced it more or less. So it's like computation and search, or like search and learning or something. What are the two? I think it was search and learning were the two things that you're supposed to be focused on.
Search and design?
Mm-hmm.
There's a pretty famous book.
It's not a book. It was like a real short paper saying the hard lesson or something like that. And the hard lesson is like human specialization is not valuable for machine learning in the long run because computers keep getting faster and specialized algorithms generally don't scale well. Except for search and learning. Like search scales well because you can break it out and break the search space into smaller pieces. And learning works well because you can scale it. You can do the learning and then deploy it on multiple platforms. But other than that, like special algorithms generally require access to the whole data set and modifying the whole data set at once. And that means you can't parallelize it.
Got it. Leave my face out of this one.
So anyway,
details. Let's look up here. That's awesome. That reminds me of another book that I haven't read, but again, read summaries of. And the basic notion was there's two different ways to come up with an idea. One can either design one, or one can just kind of select one. So it's like search. He also used the word search and I think against design. And the general idea was like, if you're trying to build a building, you can do one of two things. You can either sit down and try and construct a building by just like trying to figure out all the pieces and put the whole thing together, or you can just kind of like try and be creative and see what shows up in your mind and then pick one that you like. Right? And getting some noise basically and then grabbing the best looking answer is a much faster way to think. And then he actually these have some sort of parallel in computer science that I don't
because what's
really
going on is you're not just grabbing a random answer. What you're doing is you're employing your pattern recognition facility,
right,
to do the processing for you.
It's not exactly. It's not actual noise, but it's a noisier.
That's like the idea of brainstorming is kind of that same thing. Like, let's just kind of heat up the environment until
he kind of constructs those two different ways of thinking, and then he makes two computer science parallels, which I don't understand, and I have to read the book to get rid of it.
Okay.
But he's a computer scientist writing this book, not like some sort of philosopher.
Yeah,
Whereas, like,
yeah.
a computer scientist is like, and this is exactly like these two different ways of like selecting information.
Approaches. Yeah.
And then he writes about in computer science, they've already been deeply investigated. And he's like, and then his conclusion of the book is like, we cannot let AI do this thing unchecked because it will always Monte Carlo into a horrible outcome for everyone, including themselves.
Hmm.
And you need to have a balance, and you can't just. It's very tempting, and he like gives some great examples of like why it's tempting to give an AI just come up with some stuff and then select through it. And it's like
Right, right.
it's
Yeah, you
not
need to give it a value. What is that? A value function? The value function is the
right.
key thing there.
It was an interesting because at the very end he talks about it. Basically ends in a book about an ethical argument for humanity and the future of AI. And I thought it was fascinating the road he took to get there.
Hmm.
And anyway, but like it's like the value statement was built into the design side. And anyway, I thought there was some very interesting parallels in that whole space to the way you and I tend to like to think. Whereas I think you tend to like to build things, and even when you're selecting, you're subconsciously building things from value sets, and then you're pulling from that. Whereas I
Mm.
prefer the more abstract, creative, let's just throw things at the wall and see what sticks approach.
Right, right. Hmm. It's interesting that he concluded that you can't let computers do that because that's basically what all of machine learning is.
Correct.
Uh,
He has big beef with basically all machine learning.
huh.
Right? Not where it is now, but like where it's about to be. Right? It's
Yeah.
like you can't lose a system like this.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay, it's
Yeah. You have
okay
to
in
have
a lab,
limited.
it's constrained, something
Right.
like, but you don't want, you
Right.
can't have this at the core and then lose something. It needs to have this counterbalance. Anyway,
Right. Yeah.
let me get you the. I will
Yeah. Don't let
find
it
the.
change its own value statements. That'd be the first thing probably.
I'll post a link in the description for the paper that you talked about and the book I'm talking about.
All right. Cool.
Um, this is a note for myself.
Are you going to be editing this later, or am I?
I don't plan to edit anything. That
Okay.
takes too much time. So
You're
I
just going to
plan on
post it.
just posting stuff
Cool.
directly because I'm very busy.
There you go.
All right. So we also got well, if we get, okay, I'll tell you what. We get 100, no, we get 500 monthly views. I will
Okay.
hire an editor.
There you go. That's your challenge, audience, of
Challenge your
Tim Van
audience.
Landenberg and three other guys.
Hey, Tim.
Hi, Tim.
Uh, okay. Where were we on fledgling? I think we
Well, I
left
thought
off.
there was an
I was
interesting
trying to
point
map.
that you brought up that
Go ahead.
the best way or the fastest way for people to select ideas is to have a bunch of random ones thrown up on the screen and then you pick the one that looks best, because that's basically where I was coming from, or the closest thing that I've gotten to a mechanic for fledgling, a general mechanic for fledgling, is like fledgling procedurally
Right.
generates a bunch of options and then you're like, I like that one.
Interesting. Okay, I like this. I don't actually think that's a problem because it's not actually the thing described. You are sitting there describing it, and you might have design and you might have select. And I would love to take fledgling and then on the other side have a neural net just play fledgling and see what happens. But I suspect a very, very noisy result. Um, anyway, it'd be fun.
Mhm. Yeah, well, self-training is kind of the or self play, I guess. When you have a system playing against itself, that's the fastest way to train, right? Because then you can have it
Great.
uh, playing against its own strategies and things.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about that angle as like the root computation engine. I hadn't really put much. I mostly think from the UI space and from like the game mechanics. I have a very board game centered brain because I've been playing it for 10 years. But
Mm.
I don't think in CPU space very fluently. And the idea of the core mechanic is here's a bunch of options, pick a thing.
Because
Actually,
that's
that
basically
solves a
what.
ton of the problems, right? Because one of the problems I'm having with fledgling is the scope is by its nature so large that I can't figure out how to constrain behavior. And you could
Mm.
have a ridiculously broad scope in a motive space while still only giving people 5 options if those 5 options are way spread out on a vector space of possibility. Like one of them is a
Yeah.
political choice, and one of them is a violence choice, and one of them a construction choice, and one of them is a time travel choice, and one of them is like we have this really abstract map of game space, and we still get to feel like we're fleshing it all out because we're getting these kind of shotgun answers all over it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like
and
this a
and you
lot.
could
I hadn't heard this.
kind of adjust the choke on the idea range, right? You could be like,
Right.
this one, but choke it down. I want some more options in this area.
Oh, I see. Okay. Um,
Or like, like none of these options are what I'm thinking of. Broaden it out a bit more, and just like keep zooming out until you get to a scope that has something in it that's interesting to you.
right. I would love to use that.
So it's
Uh,
basically just like a zoom in, zoom out button, right? Like zoom in or zoom out. It's like microscope kind of.
right. Honestly, like the zoom in, like recompute on this, like you're pointing up and down the vector space, right?
Mm.
Which is
Or a
so
tree of some
similar
kind.
to,
Yeah.
yeah. Uh, it might be. Is it a tree? I don't see it as a tree. I see it as a space. Do
Mm.
you
Yeah.
actually, because the tree to me implies a design in which some human agent is putting in the options and how they all making
Right.
all those
Right.
links
No, I'm
manually.
thinking of a tree in the sense of like the way that a real life tree grows, where it's fleshing out a space. Like a tree is growing in order to make the best use of a three-dimensional space. So this would be like a organically developed uh, thing that is exploring the vector space, right? Like it exists in the vector space that you're thinking of.
So you have vector space, and then you have some sort. Oh, okay. So they basically just want that. We want to put a seed in it with, and that's going to contain what the vectors are, and then
Well, we're
then the next thing we're trying to impact, I think, would be like those module spaces we were talking about earlier. It's like these are the types of mechanics through which that the vectors interact,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then you'd
The
you'd have
landscape.
some sort of
It sets the
random number
landscape
generator,
for
and then you
yeah.
try and basically build out the space that way. So
Yeah.
this is where it's getting to fractal maps.
Yeah. Yeah.
And why I think in order to accomplish this, we either need some sort of genius tree growing algorithm, which of this room only one of us has made. Um, and then, or we need some way to take information and procedurally map it to fractals. But I don't know enough about that space at all. I don't know any fractal mathematicians.
Mm. Well, I mean, fractal calculations are almost all. I think they are all recursive. It's a recursive calculation, and you can build a tree recursively. I mean, that's what a branching algorithm does. So it's basically the same thing. It's just you're using usually a fractal is using very tightly recursive rules to build something complicated, and like real life trees are actually much more reliant on the landscape outside than they are their own rules. Like if you try to sprout a seed in a completely non-stimulating environment, it won't sprout. Like it needs light and it needs gravity and it needs moisture and all that stuff. So there's like a bunch of stuff in the environment that are changing what a fractal does, or what a real
Tree
life tree
does.
does. And a fractal is created in kind of this mathematical void where the only um, a lot of them are just the real and imaginary number plane. So
Right.
like that's the entire environment. So the way that I'm imagining the fledgling thing working on a mechanical level is that the modules create the landscape and the environment, and then the play creates the vegetable that that represents whatever it is that you're doing.
The play is going to generate. So you would have you played? I love unpacking games. Have you played or unfolding games? A Dark Room.
No, I don't think I have.
You start and there's only it was one of the first kind of idle games that took off, but its appeal wasn't that it's idle. Basically, the idea is you start off with a little flash interface with a text box in it. It says like a dark room, and then there's a box and it says like light the fire. And you click light the fire and it says you have no wood, and then under that a new button pops up. It says gather wood. You click the gather wood.
And I think I may have. Yeah, I may have played a bit of it.
And then you stoke it up until it's a warm room, and then this guy stumbles in and he talks about it, and then it slowly unfolds. And I won't spoil it, but like later on, I had this moment that one of my favorite gaming moments was when I was playing a dark room, and I got this all filled out, and like, you know, it was bustling and doing well, and like, yeah, okay, cool. And then all of a sudden, it slides over, and a new box shows up with totally different mechanics on it that is sitting on top of the game I was just playing. And I was like, oh, this is great. And it was like, and then immediately my mind went to like, what if we could get this dynamic to be procedural such that, and that's is where one of the first.
Is that the where you can get the compass or?
Yeah.
And
it's like, what if we did this procedurally? Because you could go RTS afterwards, you could go whatever, and if it was just a procedural map, then you're like, you have this thing, you've built this space, and then there's several mechanics interacting on this layer, and it's like, if we have spare modules, then you might be able to have kind of this new game plus, or okay, next level. It's like, take the game I just played, next level, and it's like adds grabs of like no we select, throws a bunch of modules up, and it's like, what module do you want to add on top,
right?
And then it would just wrap and then grab this thing inside it, and now we have a new game going on. And
sure and it uses the module to rebuild the landscape, and then you're playing in a landscape with more variables or however you think about it.
So then what you'd end up having, if you did this, you'd have a bunch of sorted orders and developed things. So you like, the first people that would play Fledgling would be like just mucking around in really abstract spaces until they eventually might grow something fun. Like they might grow a cool game to play. And then they're like, hey guys, I did this game, then this game, then this game, and I really like layer 5. It's so fun. Here's my template. And now anyone can just jump in and pull that whole set, and then they can start where that guy lives. And now you have an artificial depth, well, not artificial depth, you have real depth that's already been built out by some other player growing organically.
Right. Yeah, and that's the equivalent of handing someone else the seed, right? Like you grow this tree and it bears fruit, and then you have the seed of that, and then you can give it to someone else and be like, here, put this in your game. And I think you'll be happy with what comes out of it.
Right. Oh, this is a cool game loop. It's got that Minecraft modder appeal to it, where it's like the community's all excited about building some sort of cool mod, and then they just like have mod bundles, and then those mod bundles get mod bundled, and then you have these.
Yeah. A game built around modding. That was actually something that I don't remember his name. The Sea of Memes guy was attached to. He wanted to build this game that was all about like computer programming, I guess. It was like it had like the scripting language was a core part of the game or whatever. But the idea was that it was all about like modding the game. like Minecraft, but actually where it's committed to the modding thing.
Sea of memes.
See, I think it's down now. He passed away some years ago. And his website went to squatters.
Sea of memes.
You
I
can
got
go
Sea
back.
of Thieves.
No, Sea of Thieves is a pretty cool game, but that's not. Let's see.
Oh, Sea of Memes is now the name of the Sea of Thieves Reddit. You'll have to. You can post it later. Yeah.
Nice.
Okay. Well, if you want to post it in a bit, I do have hard stops now on Friday morning. By the way,
there we go.
Because Atticus, I am walking him to school every morning, which has been nice. So he started school on Wednesday, and I will have to leave around like 7:50 or 7:55. But I will have to leave suddenly when he arrives.
There we go. I'll have a hard cutoff.
Yeah. Okay. I like this idea of the selection mechanism as the interface, the zoom in and zoom out. It's actually really easy to roll into game mechanics, like because we have currencies that get passed around between the modules, and a currency can be the zoom in and zoom out feature if you want. Right? It makes it an option to like make a. It's a way to produce scarcity in an otherwise infinite universe.
Okay. Yeah. That's the idea. The idea.
I'm worried. So you played AI.Dungeon, right?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, so as I'm thinking about zooming in and zooming out on stuff and how procedural generation works and my experiences of AI.Dungeon, the main thing that was frustrating was when you'd go up and down these trees, it would like it's throwing you a thing that happens and you interact with it, right? And you investigate and it throws you, but doesn't show you a selection, which we want to do. But the idea is like you find a lamp and it's like, oh, cool. And you investigate. And the more you look at this lamp, the more the AI churns on it and makes it more and more interesting. It's got a coin slot in it and it's got a whatever. It's got a whatever it is.
Right.
I had a lamp with a coin slot. You put it in and then the light turned off and then someone stabbed me in the back. And it's like, and then I went off in this adventure with this guy who's stabbing me, and then the lamp never was relevant again, and it never tied in, right? So like it didn't keep this stuff. I even took it and like embedded into the long-term memory. It's like this lamp is awesome, and I write it in. I wrote up the description out, copy and pasted. Okay, here's the lamp, and
but it didn't know what to do with
it.
it.
It never did anything with this lamp that was so cool.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about I was just running a quick simulation of Fledgling playing Space Wheat, and you're on your farm, and you're like, oh no, X, and it says, how about these Ys? And it's like you can trade your wheat for 6 denarii, and you can go bounty hunt this guy, right? He's got a proper name, and it's like, well, tell me more about this guy. It's like, well, you can do this thing, or you can talk to his friends, or you can do whatever else, and you can have this whole this villain or this plot, and we can get into it if we want. But like, I have no way to conceive of how this cool little branch we just made has any relationship back over to wheat or the other things in my life, right?
Whatever the problem is that you were trying to solve.
Right. So I could see how like you could build out cool connection maps from any point that you're in can go out. But there's a very compelling thing that happens when, and this is like what Sluggy Freelance was famous for, is taking these loose ends and like tying them together in ways that like, no, they're related, which I'm sure was improvised, but it didn't matter. He was doing creativity like this, leaving all these loose ends. And like, if there was some way to thread through those into the current input. It's like, do you remember these 6 things that happened to you in the past? It's now relevant.
Yeah. The thing that I was thinking about in relation to how it's relevant to your problem on the farm is like when you said, oh no, it's like, well, this is a This is it's not a chronic problem, right? This is an acute crisis of some kind. So it probably has to do with like either the crops or the violence, some kind of violence is happening. And then if it's related to another guy, then it's probably not like the guy is like has a weather control machine. It's probably like the guy is coming in and like burning your crops or stealing your crops or something, right? So then it's like, okay, well, if you need to go and like kill this guy, then it seems like it's a violence problem. So it's in violent space, right? It's violence adjacent. And so then the solutions that you have for that are going to be in violent space as well, right? Like, or probably they're going to be adjacent to that space.
What makes a problem acute? How close it is to death.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
crops are dying, you might die. These are both of the urgent death scenarios.
Right. Right. Or the jungle wolves are attacking or something, right? Like
Right.
usually don't have to go kill a guy to solve that problem, but maybe you need to find a guy who kills guys,
Would
like
you
a
be
violence
okay?
related
Like,
guy.
I could see this happening with the current concept. It's like, oh no, crops might die. And you're like, select your next problem.
Oh no, crops might die.
Um,
All right. Well, there we go. That is the sudden end of Fledgling Talk, maybe. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next week with more fascinating discussion, or maybe just some discussion. I'm going to stick around, though, because maybe Luke will be back. Oh, look
I
at
am
that.
back.
The timing.
Okay. I got to figure out, we still have to figure out the schedule. Jen is on her way with Atticus, so I guess I do have a warning. I have to
Well,
leave
there we
in a few
go.
minutes.
Very good. All right. Well, I was doing the outro while you were gone.
Okay, perfect.
Whatever outro we have.
Okay.
So we said last week that we were going to both have worked on game development and have something to share, but neither of us had Unity open, and neither of us have worked on game development.
No,
I did
not
meet a guy in
yet.
the hardware store who was a game developer,
I
and I
brought
think
my
he's.
game design stuff to
Hey, there you
my
go.
new office.
Yes.
I don't know if I'm going to work on Fledgling, but I have a game that's got some unique mechanics that is like I should finish this one.
Yeah, yeah. Excellent.
Anyway,
I met a
well,
game
this
dev
has
who
been
worked at the hardware store, and I think he was using Godot. So I might pop him with Godot and give it a try.
okay. Elia has been putting some has been uh, mentioning Flutter a lot to me, and it might be useful for some of my app projects, but you can also make games in it. Unity's way better for it, but check out Godot. I'm going to check out Flutter next. Is probably the next thing I might make.
Is that like
And
flutter like a butterfly, or like flutter like the dam failed?
Flutter like the butterfly. It's
Okay.
Google's I don't know, open source multi-platform web app
Hmm.
creator
Hmm.
space.
Interesting. All right. Cool. Well, it's good to talk to you again. Talk to you next
Good to
week.
talk to you too. Bye bye.